off last time in a really, really good spot, which is, I can't take credit for that. That was random chance. I wish I could say I timed things to like a theater production. I sure as hell don't. So here's a question I have for you guys. And this is posted. This PowerPoint is posted, so write down as little or as much as you have to because it's online for you. How many of you guys ever called anybody an idiot? Moron. Imbecile. And we're all chuckling. Do you know where those words come from?
Yes. Psychology.
Yes, they are IQ levels, aren't they?
Yeah.
It comes from psychology. They're old, like 1950s and 40s IQ levels. If your IQ was low enough, you were called an idiot. I'm going to go by memory. This might not be right, Janelle. If it was lower enough, you were an imbecile, and if it was lower enough, you were the third one. Moron. There was levels depending on how low your IQ or how high. There were also genius, gifted. There's lots of different labels that have gone, and they've gone through changes over the decades. Those, we all laugh, right? Idiot. I use it myself, to talk about myself quite frequently. I just found this out relatively recently that it's tied back to IQ. So you've heard of IQ?
Yes.
Yes? What is it?
Intelligence.
Intelligence? Quotient. How is it calculated? Now I can tell you that the average is 100. If you have an average IQ, it's defined to be 100. And the plus or minus on that is 15. I know that because I've seen the tests and that's how they said it. So how do you calculate IQ?
Well, it's a test.
You take a test, thank you, Katie.
Pretty subjective though, it's cultural and...
Very cultural, very mathematical.
Okay.
I routinely test off the charts on these things because I'm predisposed, I'm biased towards doing well. They're big on grammar, they're big on pattern recognition, logic, and math. Well, that's pretty much me. If you made it about like cooking, I'd be a moron. But so I'm predisposed to do all of them. So yes, they're culturally biased, they're mathematically biased, they're logically biased, they're pattern recognition biased, good. But how do they actually get the number 100? Anybody know? Where does an IQ of 100 come from?
Is that the standard? The average?
Why is it? Yes, it is. That is average. So in other words, adult IQ looks like this. Okay, I'm going to turn this off for just a second. And we'll draw on the board. Adult IQ looks like this in the population. So there's a bell curve. Many things are bell-shaped. This is just one of them. At the highest point on the bell, on this axis right down here are the IQs. What number's right here? 100. It's got a standard deviation of 15. So if we add and subtract 15, we come out to 115 here, and we come down to 85 here, yeah? That's one standard deviation. What percent are in there? Very nice. 68%, very nice. You go up to 2, down to 70, good. Heard it over there. There's 95%. If you go out another one, you get almost everybody except for the very, very, very bright or the very, very, very not bright. And again, I'm using the word bright, which is pretty subjective too. What does IQ measure? Intelligence, allegedly. What is intelligence? Well, if it's a biased test, I'm not sure what it is. I'm pretty sure my son is more intelligent than me. Fairly certain anyway, he's more clever. He seems smarter most of the time, especially when he has a good night's sleep. But how do they measure it? How do they know if the middle is 100?
Because they did a whole entire sample.
Yep.
And out of that sample,
That's
the most people got
good.
better, so they labeled that.
Absolutely. Take one step back. Where do the hundreds come from? Where do the 115s and the 130s and the 85s and the 70s? I want to know where those numbers actually came from. Katie, you take a test. That test gives you what's called a mental age. Anybody taken an IQ test before? A couple of you have. Good. So you've taken it. I encourage you to take them online. They're fun. There's plenty of free ones you can take. They'll email you the results and try to sell you like Viagra. But just ignore that. Whatever. I guess they figure if you get a high enough IQ that you need Viagra. I don't know. Whatever. So anyway, you get a mental age. Now it's called an intelligence quotient. Yeah? Quotient. What does quotient mean? What in particular? Division. It means you're dividing something. So what are you dividing? You take your mental age and divide it by your actual age. That number is where these come from, if you change it to a percentage. So I am 40. If I took an IQ test and I tested as a 40-year-old, 40 divided by 40 is 1, turned to a percentage is 100. So if your mental age matches your chronological age, you have 100 IQ. If I tested, well, it's too hard to do in my head with the 130. My son's 6. Suppose he tests as an 8-year-old on an IQ test. 8 divided by 6, I think is 1.33, if I'm doing my math right. Right, 8 divided by 6, 1.33. That would put him at an IQ of 133 over here, which is pretty damn high. It's outside of 2 standard deviations. He would be in that gifted or whatever category over there. Okay? If a 2-year-old kid takes an IQ test, which I'm not sure I would do this, but if a 2-year-old kid takes an IQ test and tests as a 4-year-old, that's a 200 IQ, which is considered off the charts. I think it's actually higher than it's ever been tested before. Please!
Who decides what the standard for a 4-year-old is?
I don't know. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm saying this is what's done. I'm saying this is what happens. I'm not saying I got issues with the test itself, like Katie brought up, and you are too, Lydia. I'm not saying I agree with how it's done. I'm saying this is how it's done. We might be able to do it better. And even after we're done, what is intelligence anyway? Dolphins are pretty intelligent from everything I read. But, you know, I don't know. I'm just saying this is what's done. How about it? I don't know. Is that intelligence or knowledge? See, there's a difference, I think, there between intelligence and retention and regurgitation of information. I had a kid in my class, my abstract algebra class, the hardest class I ever took in college, undergrad or master's. Abstract algebra, 30 kids in the class. I got a C+. I was the 3rd highest grade and the lowest passing grade in the class. 90% of the class failed. Me, C+. I was the 10th percentile, or the 90th percentile. My friend Julie was the 93rd percentile, and she got like a B- or something. Jason, autistic savant, brilliant mathematician. As far as regurgitating information, he had 100 in the class. The prof taught to Jason. He lectured to Jason. Jason answered all his questions in class. The rest of us just tried to keep up. Thereby, 90% of the class failed. It was the most obscene thing I've ever. I just went through every class just like, I want to drink. I want to drink. I remember going to get my grade at the end of the term. He wouldn't give us our grades. We had to go see him to get our grade, our final grade. And I had no idea if I even passed at that point. I went to his office. I sat down. And he's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I think I'm doing shit." He's like, "You got a C+," and I burst into tears and walked out. Done. Check. But yeah, I don't know where they fall. I mean, knowledge-wise, they fall on this side of the spectrum, but is that intelligence? I have no idea. If it's heavily mathematical based, I guess. But that raises the question of what is intelligence? Are we measuring it properly? I don't know. Let's not deal with that if it's okay, and let's just deal with the measurements themselves. Because once you know this, you can answer questions like, for example, what percentage are, well, it's one question, what percentage are dull normal? So dull normal is one of those PC terms that's come up since. We don't use moron and imbecile anymore. So dull normal is between 80 and 90. So here's 80 here, right? 80 is about here, and 90 is about here. So that's the dull normal range. So the question I have is, what chunk of the curve is that? Now, before you grab for technology, although I do want to grab for technology. Well, you know what? Grab for technology. Can we use technology right now to do it? Can you put 80 and 90 in there? Could you put 80 and 90 in your go for it. Do it right now. Please, Trey, go.
So the IQ test